Anna Kepner's case was already haunting the community, a young life cut tragically short. But what happened next would shake everyone to their core. For weeks, investigators were quiet. Families held their breath, and the city waited, hoping for a breakthrough that never seemed to come. 2 months later, has justice finally caught up, or is this another dead end? Images of the crime scene flicker across our minds. The last traces of Anna, the notes left behind, the unanswered calls. Every detail mattered. Every clue was critical. Just as the investigation seemed on the verge of solving Anna's murder, an unexpected clue surfaced, completely overturning everything investigators thought they knew. Suddenly, a case that seemed almost solved was thrown back into uncertainty. Friends and family were left questioning. Could this be the lead that changes everything, or a cruel twist of fate? Who could have left this clue, and why now? Was the killer closer than anyone imagined, or was someone else manipulating the evidence behind the scenes? Crime scene photos, witness statements, and a timeline everyone relied on were suddenly cast in a new light. Every alibi, every suspect, every assumption had to be reconsidered. The clue didn't just reopen an investigation. It exposed secrets that no one expected, secrets that would shake the city and the people closest to Anna to their very core. The case is far from over. And now, more than ever, every new lead could bring either closure or chaos. What will detectives uncover next? Will this new clue finally bring Anna's killer to justice, or will it leave more questions and answers? The story isn't over yet, and the truth might be closer and more shocking than anyone thinks. On Friday, November 7, 2025, at approximately 11:17 a.m., the Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner recorded the moment that would forever alter what began as a family holiday aboard the Carnival Horizon in the Caribbean. An 18-year-old from Titusville, Florida, was discovered deceased in her stateroom, found by housekeeping staff hidden under a bed, wrapped in a blanket and covered with life jackets. The holiday had started like any other. Anna Kepner was on a 6-day cruise with her father, Christopher Kepner, her stepmother, Chantel Hudson, her 14-year-old brother, and a 16-year-old stepbrother. But what should have been a celebration at sea became a sudden and unexplained tragedy. Mariners and passengers aboard the Horizon had no indication that this voyage would end in a federal homicide investigation. The Federal Bureau of Investigation took over the case when the ship returned to Port Miami on November 8, 2025, citing jurisdiction because the incident occurred in international waters. In the weeks that followed, public details remained sparse. Federal authorities offered little commentary beyond acknowledging an ongoing probe. No arrests were announced. No suspect was publicly identified by law enforcement. What did emerge came from official records unrelated to the cruise itself. Filings in a family court custody dispute involving Anna's stepmother and her ex-husband. These documents revealed that authorities had informed the family that a criminal case may be initiated against one of the minor children in the home. The filing did not specify charges. It did not state a name. The Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's public version of Anna's death certificate confirmed her passing on November 7th aboard the Carnival Horizon, but did not list a cause of death due to legal restrictions on what could be disclosed publicly. Family members, speaking to ABC News, stated that investigators had classified the case as a homicide caused by mechanical asphyxiation, a finding consistent with bruising observed on her neck. Despite this, federal authorities have not released the official autopsy or toxicology results, and they have declined to comment further. There has been no public announcement of formal charges. Interviews with crew and passengers, forensic analysis of cabin contents, and hundreds of hours of surveillance footage remain under review, according to investigative sources. Officials have reportedly examined key card data to reconstruct who entered and left Anna's cabin, but no definitive timeline or public explanation has been shared. In an unexpected twist drawn directly from legal filings, the stepbrother, a 16-year-old who shared Anna's stateroom, has been described in court records as a subject of the investigation, though the FBI has not labeled him a suspect publicly and no accusations have been pressed in open court. For the family, the silence from law enforcement has been agonizing. Christopher Kepner told reporters that the FBI has shared as much with his family as it has with the general public. Essentially nothing more than what's already known. 2 months after that vanished holiday, The Carnival Horizon has long since docked. Anna's memorial was held in Titusville, and her remains were cremated, yet the investigation remains open. The evidence collected aboard the ship, the blankets, life jackets, surveillance records, and family court filings, now hold the only remaining threads investigators can follow. And as the case quietly unfolds, one profound question stands. Which piece of the silent ship's evidence will finally break the mystery and lead to the truth? On the morning of Friday, November 7th, 2025, the routine path of a Carnival ship cleaner took her into stateroom 8367 on the Carnival Horizon as it sailed toward Port Miami. She expected beds to be made and towels folded. Not a scene that would become central to a federal homicide inquiry. When the housekeeper pulled the cabin door open, the first thing she saw was a mattress shifted from its standard place. Only then did she glimpse what lay beneath. Hidden under the bed, wrapped in blankets and covered with life jackets, was a lifeless body of 18-year-old Anna Kepner, a young woman from Titusville, Florida. The discovery was as unexpected as chilling. Housekeeping logs later confirmed a routine cleaning shift that morning, and port medical records would list the time Anna's body was found at approximately 11:17 a.m. aboard a vessel. Her remains have been concealed so completely that staff reported being taken aback by what they saw. Official statements from law enforcement sources disclosed that the Horizon was nearing the end of its 6-day Caribbean voyage when a housekeeper's call came over the ship's radio. Security officers arrived and sealed the scene immediately, awaiting authorities once the cruiser reached shore. Inside that cabin, investigators later noted the juxtaposition of ordinary holiday belongings and the disturbing positioning of Anna's body. Blankets arranged around her, life jackets placed atop. These were not casual details. Crew staff later recounted the surreal sight of a cabin otherwise undisturbed. A written advisory from Carnival delivered to that room on November 7th instructed guests to vacate by early morning the next day for noise and disruption tied to forthcoming investigation. This was unusual, a clear sign that the normal operations of a ship had been overtaken by something no cleaning crew had ever trained for. The FBI moved quickly once the Horizon docked at Port Miami on November 8th. Agents boarded with the authority to conduct a criminal probe on the high seas, as the death occurred in international waters, a jurisdictional threshold that placed the Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner and federal investigators at the center of the case. Publicly, law enforcement revealed little at first. The FBI declined to release details about suspects or persons of interest. Yet court filings from an unrelated family custody dispute connected to the situation signaled that one of the minor children aboard, specifically a 16-year-old step-sibling, was being examined by agents. The filing cautioned that testimony could be prejudicial to that person in the criminal investigation. Meanwhile, official medical records released to the family, but not to the public, classified Anna's death as a homicide by mechanical asphyxiation, a finding that aligned with preliminary investigative descriptions suggesting pressure to the neck consistent with significant external force. Yet even with these confirmed details, the housekeeper's discovery, FBI involvement, the homicide classification, the broader public still waited for answers the FBI has not provided. Surveillance footage, security logs, forensic analysis of cabin, and interviews with crew remain under review without any arrest announced. It was a routine crew's cleaning duty that first drew attention to this case. But the questions that ripple out from that single moment now span federal investigation, unsettled evidence, and unanswered whys. And the next truth uncovered may reshape what we think we know about what happened in that cabin. When the Carnival Horizon glided into Port Miami on the morning of November 8, 2025, federal agents were already waiting on the dock. The ship had completed its scheduled Caribbean itinerary. But what began as a family vacation was now an unfolding federal criminal investigation. The FBI's Miami field office took command of the case immediately upon the vessel's arrival. The Bureau's involvement was not routine. The FBI only asserts jurisdiction when a suspicious death occurs on U.S.-based cruise ships that operate in international waters, circumstances that applied here and that triggered a complex maritime probe. Officials from the FBI declined to comment publicly on the specifics of their inquiry, saying only that agents were actively investigating the death of an 18-year-old passenger found dead in her cabin the day before. Carnival Cruise Line cooperated, but otherwise offered little detail beyond confirming that law enforcement was on board to assist. Law enforcement sources later confirmed that officers did more than simply interview crew and passengers. Agents began reviewing shipboard security camera footage, access card logs, and crew manifests. Tools are standard in maritime investigations when foul play is suspected. In the days after the Horizon docked, court filings in an unrelated family legal case offer a glimpse into the direction of the FBI's focus. A motion filed in Brevard County, Florida, claimed that FBI investigators notified parties that a criminal case may be initiated against one of the minor children aboard, a revelation that added a layer of complexity to what was already a tightly guarded inquiry. These filings did not name individuals, but they did establish that the investigation was moving beyond procedural fact-finding and toward potential criminal action. The government's silence, at least publicly, became part of the story itself. The official record revealing only what had to be disclosed and withholding what could not yet be shared. By mid-November, law enforcement sources told media outlets that the FBI was examining multiple pieces of forensic evidence from inside the stateroom where the body was found. This included physical evidence recovered by ship security and processed by FBI evidence technicians once the Horizon was secured in port. The Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's Office, while issuing the official time of death as 11:17 a.m. on November 7, 2025, refrained from publicly disclosing cause or manner of death, citing the active nature of the criminal investigation. That restraint underscored the FBI's control over the flow of information. To those watching from afar, family members in Florida and news audiences around the country, the presence of federal agents on a cruise ship became a focal point of speculation. Yet the Bureau's standard practice in cases like this is to gather evidence away from the spotlight until charges are ready to be filed. No arrest was announced in November or December, even as the investigation deepened. And while law enforcement agents processed evidence and combed through security logs, a quiet tension built around a single unresolved question. What exactly did the FBI uncover that has turned this from mysterious death into a long-running federal investigation? This unanswered question leads directly into the next phase of the story, one that focuses on a crucial legal development that may reflect where investigators believe the truth lies. In the final days of November 2025, a document quietly shifted this entire investigation. A copy of 18-year-old Anna Kepner's death certificate, provided to family and shared with national media outlets, showed a single, stark line. The death had been officially ruled a homicide. The certificate, issued on November 24, 2025, named the cause of death as mechanical asphyxia, a medical term indicating that something external prevented the body from breathing. It noted that Anna was mechanically asphyxiated by other persons. That phrase, by other persons, is the exact language used by medical examiners when the evidence shows another human's involvement in cutting off the victim's ability to breathe. There is no ambiguity in that wording in official records. The date of injury noted on the certificate was November 6, 2025, one day before her body was found. The time of death was left unknown, even though the official time she was pronounced dead aboard the ship remained listed from earlier reports. Medical experts not involved in the case explained publicly that mechanical asphyxia covers situations where physical force or an object prevents breathing, a range that includes choking or pressure to the neck that blocks the airway. It does not occur without external interference. This was not a classification of undetermined or accidental. This was a conclusion reached by the Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner's Office, based on evidence and examination of the body. The ruling aligned with earlier reporting from trusted sources. Officials familiar with the investigation had described injuries consistent with significant pressure to the neck and had said preliminary findings pointed away from natural causes. Yet even with this formal homicide determination, the official autopsy report and full toxicology results remain unreleased to the public. The medical examiner's office has declined to comment on specifics, citing the ongoing federal inquiry. The FBI, which leads the investigation into deaths on U.S.-based cruise vessels, has likewise offered no public statements about suspects or charges. The Bureau maintains only that it continues to pursue the case. In the weeks after the ruling, media outlets and legal filings revealed one further detail. In unrelated family court documents, Anna's 16-year-old stepbrother was identified as a potential subject of the investigation. Those filings stopped short of confirming federal charges, but they provided a rare public link between law enforcement interest and a specific individual. No arrests have been publicly announced. No formal charges have been filed in open court. The homicide ruling stands as an official recorded truth, but the path from that truth to accountability remains untraveled. Official records show mechanical asphyxia and a shift from mystery to murder. Yet much of the forensic detail that led to this ruling, the full autopsy, toxicology, and complete investigative report, lies behind federal seals. In my view, and based only on verified documents and records, the homicide ruling was a pivotal moment, a point where this case transformed from unanswered questions into an acknowledged crime. But the deeper truth, who applied that force and why, remains unconfirmed in any public filing. And that unresolved truth now pushes the investigation toward a legal battlefield where family court filings and federal evidence may finally intersect. By mid-November 2025, new legal filings began to reveal something the public had not heard directly from law enforcement. In the midst of an unrelated child custody dispute in Brevard County, Florida, court documents stated that the FBI was investigating one of the minor children on the same cruise as a possible suspect in the death of 18-year-old Anna Kepner. These filings did not name the child, but the context made clear who was being discussed. The documents, entered on November 17, 2025, were filed by Anna's stepmother, Chantel Hudson Kepner, as part of a motion to delay proceedings. The motion stated that counsel for the stepmother had been advised through discussions with FBI investigators that a criminal case may be initiated against one of the minor children. That was the first public hint that someone close to Anna was under federal scrutiny. The minor described in these filings was a 16-year-old stepbrother who had shared a stateroom with Anna aboard the Carnival Horizon. The cruise line's own passenger records confirmed that Anna, her father Christopher Kepner, her stepmother, the 16-year-old, and at least one other sibling were all traveling together on the 6-day Caribbean voyage that ended in tragedy. A separate court hearing on December 5, 2025, made the situation even clearer. Attorneys for both parents referenced the 16-year-old in proceedings before a Brevard County Circuit judge. During the hearing, the older boy's father described his son as a suspect in the death, based on discussions with investigators and their legal counsel. The hearing record also disclosed that the teen had been hospitalized shortly after the cruise ended and was now living with a relative. According to filings, his return to the family home was being carefully considered under both legal and medical advisement. At no point have federal authorities issued a public statement declaring that an arrest has been made or that any suspect has been officially charged. The FBI continues to withhold operational updates, stating only that an active investigation remains underway. This consistent lack of confirmation from the Bureau stands in contrast to what is reflected in the civil court filings. A motion filed by lawyers for the 16-year-old's mother asked the court to keep records under seal, citing the sensitive nature of the ongoing criminal inquiry. That motion itself reveals how deeply the investigation has intersected with family legal matters, even as law enforcement communications remain tightly controlled. Local media outlets that have reviewed these filings note that the documents reference the FBI's focus on the minor's potential involvement. Even though no law enforcement agency has publicly named him as a suspect, it's a technical distinction with real emotional weight for those following the case. National crime reporting sites and court watchers have since confirmed that the filings refer to the 16-year-old by initials only, consistent with protections afforded to minors under U.S. law. Official records, including those from family court and federal authorities, do not list a formal arrest or publicly release criminal charge. In my view, and based strictly on the official filings and law enforcement disclosures available, what emerges here is not a headline arrest, but a clear indication that federal investigators are examining someone who was aboard that ship with Anna, someone who shares her cabin, and whose movements that night are now part of the inquiry. As the investigation silently progresses, the next question is inevitable. What specific evidence has the FBI uncovered that links this person of interest to what happened in that room? In the days after November 7th, 2025, when an 18-year-old from Titusville, Florida was found dead under a bed aboard the Carnival Horizon, law enforcement maintained a tight, public silence on details of the investigation. But in a separate family court case, another layer of the story was beginning to emerge. Not from agents, but from text messages exchanged by the victim's own family. These messages, later included as exhibits in court filings, would become one of the few windows into how those closest to the situation were communicating in the immediate aftermath. On the evening of November 8th, 2025, roughly one day after the body was discovered, texts between Chantel Hudson Kepner and her ex-husband Thomas Hudson began circulating in records filed during the ongoing custody dispute over their 16-year-old son, who had been aboard the cruise. In one message, Hudson Kepner wrote that she needed him to call her ASAP, describing it as an emergency. The text thread paints a picture of urgency. In response, Hudson asked whether he could pick up one of their children to remove them from the situation. Hudson Kepner declined, noting that the child had been told only that the 16-year-old was having a hard time coping and was being evaluated at a hospital. 2 days later, on November 9th, further messages describe a brief phone call between Hudson Kepner and the 16-year-old while he remained in the medical facility. According to her text, their conversation lasted less than 2 minutes, and the boy kept repeating over and over he can't remember anything. That detail, that the 16-year-old repeatedly said he could not recall the night in question, was included not through rumor, but through court documents that quoted the exchanges directly. The text also touched on the growing concern about information spreading online and through social media. In one exchange, Hudson pointed out that people were still talking about the incident on platforms like Facebook and TikTok and expressed a desire to keep facts, especially involving their son, from unnecessary public attention. Hudson Kepner reiterated that the 16-year-old was a minor and emphasized the family's intent not to have his name released at that time. These messages were part of the broader custody dispute and were not released directly by law enforcement. Instead, they emerged through court records that became public as part of the legal process. By December 5th, 2025, just under a month after the death, a hearing in the family court captured additional context. Attorneys for Hudson Kepner explained that the teen had been evaluated medically and was now living with relatives separate from the immediate household, and that the move was intended to remove any potential risk to other children in the home. The texts in the courtroom disclosures reveal how the family was managing private information while federal agents continued their investigation, an investigation that had not produced public arrests or formal criminal charges as of late December. While these messages do not explain how Anna Kepner's death occurred, they do show how the family responded in real time to the unprecedented situation they faced, balancing privacy, legal strategy, and the well-being of minors during an active inquiry. In my view, and grounded strictly in verified court records and media reporting, these texts exemplify how information can surface indirectly when official channels remain closed, a detail that can both inform and complicate an investigation. And as these private messages enter the public record, investigators must now reconcile what was said behind closed doors with the physical evidence still under scrutiny. In the early reporting on this case, timeline seemed straightforward. Anna Kepner, 18, was found dead aboard the Carnival Horizon on November 7, 2025, at approximately 11:17 a.m., according to Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner's Office. That timestamp was widely shared in early investigative coverage. Yet as more official details surfaced, an unexpected conflict emerged in the record. A death certificate issued on November 24th, 2025 listed the day of injury as November 6th, 2025, a day before the body was found, and left the time of death officially unknown. The difference between time declared and day of injury may seem technical, but in a federal inquiry it matters. A death certificate that revises key time markers can shift how investigators interpret events and where attention is focused. What makes this more than a dry technicality is that the death certificate's date of injury contradicts early media timelines that placed Anna's last confirmed sighting with family on the evening of November 6th, then her discovery the next morning. The Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's first report, the one that recorded 11:17 a.m. on November 7th, was based on initial examination aboard the ship, but the later document cites day of injury as the night before, a detail suggesting the fatal act likely occurred hours earlier. This discrepancy is not merely clerical. When a death occurs aboard a vessel in international waters, as this one did, the timeline is central to establishing jurisdiction, leads, and suspect activity. Investigators also obtained security logs and quoted witness accounts that place Anna in her cabin the night of November 6th, and surveillance records reportedly show her returning to the room later that evening. But conflicting details about when her injuries were sustained versus when she was officially declared dead raised red flags among experts following the case. Some observers noted that the recorded 11:17 a.m. time may reflect when she was found and declared dead, not necessarily the exact moment she died. Complicating matters further, friends and extended family have shared different recollections of her last known activity. Official sources, such as the examiner's office and the FBI, have not publicly released complete autopsy or forensic reports, leaving gaps in what timelines can be verified independently. The broader picture shows multiple overlapping timelines, one based on ship records and cabin access logs, another on official medical examiner entries, and yet another on court documents from an unrelated custody dispute that reference when certain family members were questioned. These inconsistencies are not unusual in complex maritime death cases, where the sequence of events must be pieced together from logs, witness reports, cabin surveillance, and medical findings, often without complete public disclosure. But the timing conflict here goes beyond minor details. It touches on crucial elements of the investigation: the sequence of entry and exit from the cabin, the precise moment fatal injuries occurred, and how authorities reconcile these with official paperwork now part of the public record. In my view, and based strictly on the verified records available, these timeline gaps reveal how much remains unresolved and why federal authorities have been cautious in releasing information. The chronology of events, as recorded in official documents, does not yet form a seamless narrative, and that unresolved chronology, these conflicting times and dates, directs us toward the next question investigators are racing to answer: how do movements of those aboard that ship align with the evidence of exactly when and how Anna Kepner died? After the discovery of Anna Kepner's body aboard the Carnival Horizon on November 7th, 2025, authorities began interviewing anyone who might clarify what happened in the hours before her death. But as the investigation unfolded, gaps in witness accounts and conflicting details began to emerge, complicating the picture of that final night. Official records show that Anna shared her cabin with her 16-year-old stepbrother and a 14-year-old brother during the cruise from Port Miami. Court filings in a separate custody dispute later revealed that federal agents questioned those aboard the voyage, including family members, as part of their work to establish a timeline and corroborate evidence. One of the first notable discrepancies came from text messages disclosed through court documents. The stepmother, Chantel Hudson Kepner, texted her ex-husband on November 8, 2025, saying she had spoken briefly with the 16-year-old and that he kept repeating he couldn't remember anything. This detail, that the teen could not recall events, entered the public record even though it was not a formal law enforcement statement. That brief conversation, reportedly lasting less than 2 minutes, was included in the court filings not as evidence of guilt, but as part of the family's own narrative shared amid a custody dispute. At the same time, a grandparent's account shared with media outlets introduced a slightly different nuance. According to that statement, the 16-year-old said in his words that he does not remember what happened, but the grandparent was clear this was how he described his lack of memory, not an official statement of fact confirmed by investigators. The family's own commentary also touched on security footage reportedly reviewed by authorities that showed the teenager was the only person seen entering and exiting the cabin in the period before Anna was found. This detail, relayed through a family source to media, has not been verified directly by law enforcement in public filings, but underscores how gaps in official disclosure have allowed multiple, sometimes divergent, narratives to circulate. Law enforcement itself has been unusually quiet on these specific points. The FBI's Miami field office, which leads the probe, has declined to release details about witness statements or surveillance findings. Their public remarks have amounted only to acknowledging that the investigation is ongoing and that no charges have been announced. Where family accounts intersect with legal records is in the timing and availability of testimonies. In a December 2025 custody hearing, lawyers referenced the stepbrother's medical evaluation, indicating he had been hospitalized for observation after the ship reached port and then placed with relatives, but no detailed description of what law enforcement heard from him was made public. Media records also show that extended family members have provided differing recollections of what they were told by authorities and when. While the official death certificate and medical examiner's office confirmed the homicide, ruling in mechanical asphyxia, witnesses outside law enforcement have offered varied interpretations of what that means in context and how it relates to others aboard the ship. These overlapping pieces, family texts, brief verbal recalls, secondhand descriptions of surveillance, and selective legal disclosures, highlight why conflicting accounts have become a defining feature of this case. The public record has gaps not because events lack clarity, but because official investigative findings remain withheld from public view. In my view, based strictly on the verified records and documented statements available, these gaps do not point to randomness. They point to an investigation still far from conclusion, and evidence that law enforcement has chosen to keep confidential while it pursues its inquiry. And as these witness conflicts persist, another layer of the case now turns toward forensic examination, where physical evidence may either confirm or challenge what people have said so far. Nearly 2 months after November 7th, 2025, when 18-year-old Anna Kepner was found dead under a bed aboard the Carnival Horizon, one fact stands out in the public record. No arrest has been made. Law enforcement agencies involved have not publicly announced any suspect taken into custody since the initial discovery of her body. The FBI's Miami field office continues to lead the investigation into what the Miami-Dade medical examiner's office later ruled a homicide by mechanical asphyxia. That homicide classification, confirmed in an official death certificate issued November 24th, 2025, drew widespread attention. But even with that formal finding, authorities have not declared any arrest or filed formal charges in open court. Court filings in an unrelated Brevard County family law case, filed in mid-November, offered rare insight into the direction of the federal inquiry. In that motion, step-family legal documents disclosed that federal agents had informed counsel that a criminal case may be initiated against one of the minor children present on the cruise. That disclosure was widely interpreted by news outlets as a hint toward investigative focus, but did not equate to a public arrest or a criminal charge. Even in that context, no arrest warrant, no public indictment, and no booking record have been confirmed by law enforcement. Local and national reporting has consistently noted the absence of a public arrest as the FBI reviews the evidence. Weeks after the ship returned to Port Miami on November 8, 2025, federal agents were seen boarding the vessel and initiating inquiries, yet there has been no announcement of someone being taken into custody. In multiple news updates throughout late November and December, major news outlets including ABC News and NBC Miami have stated clearly that no charges have been announced in the death of Anna Kepner, even as the medical examiner's office and the FBI have declined to disclose detailed findings. Even when court filings strongly suggested the 16-year-old stepbrother was being examined by investigators and could potentially face charges, the legal documents stopped short of confirming an arrest or formal accusation. This prolonged pause in public action, over 6 weeks after the initial discovery, is not unusual in complex homicide investigations, especially those that occur in international waters and involve maritime law, federal jurisdiction, and extensive forensic work. Experts in marine criminal cases have explained that collecting, processing, and reviewing all available evidence can take substantial time before charges are prepared. Still, family members and the broader public have repeatedly expressed frustration at the lack of observable movement. In late November, the aunt of Anna Kepner described how the family was in turmoil, waiting for answers and for authorities to take the next legal steps, a sentiment echoed in multiple community reports. Friends and extended family have also recounted giving information to investigators, including detailed account of interactions and movements during the cruise. Yet none of this is translated into an arrest or official suspect announcement. Carnival Cruise Line has maintained cooperation with authorities, but similarly has no role in arrests, and the company's statements have been limited to affirming they are assisting with the federal inquiry. In my view, and based strictly on official records and credible reporting, the absence of a public arrest doesn't signal a lack of progress. It reflects the slow, meticulous nature of federal homicide investigation, where every piece of evidence must be rigorously verified before charges can be filed. And while arrests remain elusive, the next focus turns toward forensic breakthroughs that could finally provide the missing pieces necessary for formal legal action. By mid-November 2025, the death of Anna Kepner had become more than a federal homicide investigation. It had also reshaped a child custody dispute unfolding in Brevard County, Florida, intertwining family law with a criminal inquiry in a way that few expected. On November 17, 2025, an emergency motion was filed in a custody case between Chantel Hudson Kepner and her ex-husband, Thomas Hudson. The filing stated that conversations with FBI investigators had indicated a criminal case may be initiated against one of the minor children involved in that dispute, a rare and serious claim to appear in a civil courtroom. That document did not exist in a vacuum. Just days earlier, Anna's body had been ruled a homicide by mechanical asphyxia by the Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner's Office, and federal authorities were known to be conducting an active investigation. The intersection between the custody battle and the criminal probe became clearer when court filings described a 16-year-old stepbrother, the same minor reference in the FBI discussion, as the subject of that potential criminal case. While the Bureau has not publicly confirmed details, the legal filing itself functioned as one of the few windows into how the investigation was progressing behind closed doors. The court motion sought to delay scheduled custody proceedings because Chantel's testimony could, according to her lawyers, be prejudicial in a criminal matter involving her son. The claim underlined how deeply the ongoing federal probe had penetrated what would otherwise be a standard custody disagreement. Not all judges were willing to accommodate that request. At a hearing later in November 2025, a circuit judge denied Chantel Hudson's bid to seal the custody records that referenced the minor's involvement, meaning the public record preserved what was being shared in court even as the criminal investigation continued. Around the same time, a subpoena issued on November 25, 2025, ordered Anna's father, Christopher Kepner, to appear at a custody hearing in early December before Judge Michelle P. Studstill, further entwining the family law calendar with the ongoing death inquiry. At a hearing on December 5, 2025, lawyers representing both sides referenced not only custody rights, but the lingering unresolved investigation into Anna's death. The court noted that the 16-year-old had been hospitalized immediately after the ship returned to Port Miami and was now living with relatives, a circumstance tied to concerns raised during the investigation. Legal filings also revealed that attorneys were considering calling the stepbrother to testify about events connected to the cruise, though formal testimony was not yet recorded publicly. Reports indicated that attorney for Thomas Hudson might also call Christopher Kepner to provide context about family dynamics and supervision during the vacation. This merging of family law and a federal probe created a tense courtroom backdrop. On one day, issues of parental rights and visitation schedules were discussed. On another, the specter of a pending criminal case linked directly to one of those children hung over every motion, every argument, and every request to delay or seal records. Through it all, no arrest has been announced, and no formal criminal charges have been filed in open court. The FBI has neither named a suspect nor confirmed any public next steps, a silence that continues to shape how both the custody controversy and the criminal investigation are seen externally. In my view, strictly based on verified court filings and law enforcement disclosures, the custody disputes and criminal inquiry have become inextricably linked, each influencing how the other unfolds in public records and legal calendars. And as these two legal worlds collide, the next chapter will hinge on what evidence investigators bring forward, and whether that evidence will ever cross from confidential files into public accountability. When federal agents boarded the Carnival Horizon in Port Miami on November 8, 2025, they stepped into a case that was already raising profound questions. An 18-year-old from Titusville, Florida, lay dead in her cabin, hidden under a bed, wrapped in blankets and life jackets. Within weeks, official documents would declare her death a homicide by mechanical asphyxia, but one crucial piece of the forensic puzzle remained conspicuously absent from the public record for weeks: toxicology results. In the initial period after the discovery, the Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed that the cause of death involved asphyxiation, meaning something external interfered with her breathing, and noted bruising on her neck that suggested pressure consistent with a bar hold. Yet while mechanical asphyxia was formally recorded on her death certificate, the full autopsy and toxicology reports that would confirm the presence or absence of substances in her system have not been released publicly. In statements to media, sources familiar with the investigation indicated that early observations suggested no apparent drugs or alcohol were found in her body, but officials stopped short of confirming those details until toxicology is finalized. In some homicide cases, toxicology could be routine, a check for alcohol, prescription medications, or illicit substances that might explain impairment or contribute to a death. In others, toxicology can provide critical context about the state of the victim's body prior to death. Here, the FBI and medical examiner have remained silent on the specifics, citing the ongoing nature of the investigation. The silence surrounding toxicology is amplified because of how homicide investigations unfold at sea. Deaths on U.S. flag cruise ships that occur in international waters fall under federal jurisdiction, and once the FBI asserts control, the release of detailed forensic findings, especially those that might affect an active criminal investigation, is tightly restricted. Local news reporting noted that preliminary information shared with authorities indicated there were no signs of sexual assault and no obvious substances in her system, but emphasized that final autopsy and toxicology reports had not been completed at that time. Without the published toxicology results, questions remain about whether investigators have ruled out all possible influences that could have altered her physical or mental state in the hours before she died. Toxicology findings can sometimes reveal things not evident during a physical examination, remnants of prescription drugs, trace levels of substances, or other biochemical clues that help reconstruct the final hours of a person's life. In this case, the gap between what has been officially shared and what remains confidential to investigators has left a void in the public understanding of how, exactly, Anna Kepner's body came to be found in the condition it was. The recorded classification, mechanical asphyxia by other persons, tells one part of the story, but without a public toxicology report, we lack a complete picture of her physical condition before the fatal event. The FBI's continued refusal to release detailed forensic findings is not unusual in active homicide investigations, but also ensures that the timeline of forensic clarity remains incomplete for the public. As of late December 2025, no detailed toxicology report has been made available to the news media or through official press releases. In my view, and strictly based on verified reporting and official records, this silence around toxicology, what it might confirm or exclude, is a central piece of what investigators are carefully protecting until they are ready to proceed further in a legal process. And as the absence of toxicology results persists, the question looms: what truth may lie hidden in the blood and tissues that investigators are still unwilling to disclose? In the days after November 7, 2025, when 18-year-old Anna Kepner was found dead aboard the Carnival Horizon, the impact rippled far beyond federal agents and crime labs. Her death certificate later confirmed mechanical asphyxia as the cause of death, a ruling that intensified shock and sorrow among family and community alike. Within the Kepner family, grief unfolded in ways visible to the public only through documents filed in court and media interviews. In a petition tied to family legal proceedings, Anna's grandmother, Barbara Kepner, spoke with reporters about the moments before and after her granddaughter's death. She recalled Anna's last words of affection at dinner the evening before she was found. Barbara also described how relatives reacted when the news came: a medical alert over the ship's loudspeaker, followed by frantic phone calls, then silence. She said the family's first awareness of something terribly wrong came not from authorities, but from that announcement and the arrival of security personnel. But the emotional upheaval did not end with grief. The family was forced into the public eye in a way few expected. Court filings in a custody dispute revealed text message exchanges among adults about how to handle the aftermath. Some messages described efforts to shield children from media attention and manage which siblings were told what and when. These texts, released because they were part of a civil case, showed an urgency to control both public narrative and private heartbreak. In one of those exchanges, the 16-year-old stepbrother, identified in court records as the individual under review by investigators, reportedly told a family member he could not remember the events that led up to his sister's death. That detail, included in legal filings, was later widely reported in media coverage of the case. Such disclosures added layers of tension. They showed not only a family grieving for a daughter, sister, and granddaughter, but also wrestling with questions about accountability that had surfaced through legal and investigative channels. The broader community, too, was drawn into the emotional landscape of the case. Friends and classmate of Anna, a high school senior from Titusville, Florida, who had ambitions to join the military and loved cheerleading, held memorials in her honor, recalling her energy and optimism. These gatherings were documented in local news reports and spoke to a profound sense of loss felt by those who knew her. Public reaction followed the evolving nature of the investigation. Some media outlets highlighted how little law enforcement had shared with the public, juxtaposing that silence with very personal family accounts. In interviews, relatives openly questioned the pace of the inquiry and the lack of clarity about what had occurred on the ship that night, even as factual information was scarce beyond court documents and official rulings. Amid public reports and private legal filings, the emotional toll on the Kepner family was unmistakable. They were navigating not only grief for a lost loved one, but also confusion, legal battle, and a slow trickle of factual confirmation from authorities. In my view, based strictly on documented statements, official filings, and credible reporting, the emotional fallout in this case reflects how families confront tragedy when federal investigations, family court, and public scrutiny intersect in real time. And as the family continues to live with unanswered questions, another truth waits on the horizon. What the official investigation may eventually disclose about the final hours before her death. Nearly 2 months after November 7, 2025, when 18-year-old Anna Kepner of Titusville, Florida was found dead in her stateroom aboard the Carnival Horizon, one thing remains clear in the official record. No arrests have been made in connection to her death. Investigators have not publicly announced any suspect taken into custody or charged, even as the case continues under federal review. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner's Office have both declined to disclose detailed updates, citing the active nature of the inquiry. That ongoing silence has left the timeline of justice unsettled, with law enforcement offering only that the investigation remains open and progressing. In court filings that emerged in mid-November, attorneys referenced discussions with FBI agents indicating that a criminal case may be initiated against one of the minor children aboard the cruise. These filings suggested that federal investigators were scrutinizing a 16-year-old stepbrother of the victim as part of the inquiry. But even that reference did not translate into an arrest or a charge publicly filed in court. News outlets reporting on the family's plight have emphasized a vacuum of information surrounding the investigation. Local reporting noted the absence of any announcement of charges or arrests more than 3 weeks after her death, and similar coverage into December underscores that no arrest is yet public. Anna's death has been officially ruled a homicide, a grim classification that should, in many cases, pave the way to criminal charges once evidence is complete. Her death certificate lists mechanical asphyxia by other persons as the cause, based on what is known publicly. Yet the FBI's refusal to share further details about suspects or forensic findings has kept the larger truth locked behind investigative confidentiality. The family's own frustrations have surfaced in national coverage. Relatives, including Anna's aunt, have publicly expressed that they don't understand why no charges have been filed if one individual is under investigation, a frustration rooted in desire for accountability and clarity as much as in grief. In the absence of formal criminal filings, other legal threads have intersected with the investigation. Court dockets and unrelated custody proceedings disclose the FBI's involvement and curiosity about one of the teens aboard, even though the agency itself has not confirmed such details publicly. These filings have become a primary source of insight into the direction of the probe for those watching the case from the outside. While the FBI continues to sift through surveillance footage, access logs, witness interviews, and forensic material from the ship, there is no indication in public records that the pace of the investigation has translated into imminent charges. Maritime criminal cases are inherently complex, involving evidence gathered at sea, jurisdictional layers, and the additional procedural steps needed before federal prosecution can proceed. Law enforcement leaders have offered minimal commentary beyond confirming their involvement and assuring cooperation with Carnival Cruise Line. The broader community of Anna's hometown, classmates, and extended family have expressed sorrow and confusion as they observe the investigation unfold without public resolution. In my view, and based strictly on verified reporting, official filings, and public records, the absence of a public arrest at this point does not mean that justice is not being pursued. It means that investigators are still building a case, gathering evidence, verifying information, and preparing testimony and forensic data that may eventually support formal legal actions. And as the world watches and waits, one profound question remains. What piece of evidence will break this long silence and finally bring accountability so many are waiting for?